You can use the Socratic method, ask questions of people who have the expertise in those domains, and through that method, get them to consider the variables, the ones that you can't consider.
I trust the people I work with enough to hear what they say they've done and maybe even believe it, but I'm still gonna go through my own mental checklist of things I know that have worked in the past.
When we're looking for the root cause, we can find issues that are still issues. It's not to pretend that they're not, but they're more symptoms than they are issues. We need to go back over the same rigors, ask the same questions to confirm, are the conditions still the same? Curiosity plays an important role here. Looking for the root cause of a problem, you have to be curious.
In business or in team settings, when roles are very clearly defined, you can often see people trying to solve a problem that ultimately it's not a waste of time if it results in something positive, but it's an incorrect allocation of time when they should be focusing on something else.
I want to welcome everyone back to the Transferable Everything podcast with myself, Daniel Schulteis, and my co-host, James Keating. So today we're going to be talking about chapter 8 in the book, Transferable Everything, Attention to Detail. The current subtitle for that chapter is The Root Beneath the Surface. We started this episode off a little bit different than the other episodes we've been doing, where I actually read the full chapter as it currently stands. And this week, we're focused on attention to detail, the root beneath the surface. And I think one of the messages within this chapter is really focused on attention to detail isn't really about sort of like organization and, it's focused on looking at the root cause, sort of diagnostic, if you will. That's kind of the attention to detail we're looking at. And it's sort of like an objective analysis of a problem to find the root.
Gotcha.
And this is an interesting one because you and I have worked very closely in business and operations on determining root causes of problems. And I should say pretty successfully, to the point where this is something that I put a lot of focus on. It's something that I was very passionate about because I understand the cost of solving the wrong problem.
Yeah.
And it's something, to be fair, that I thought I would hold on to for quite a long time. And it turned out to be something that in many ways I've entrusted you to take over and help not just solve the problems, but identify them. And that was a pretty hard thing for me to do because I put a lot of emphasis on it and importance, like I said.
Yeah.
And so, one, I deeply appreciate and respect that you can do that.
Right.
But I think that there's probably a lot that we can talk about from our shared experiences.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess starting from the top, something that I picked up from the chapter when you were reading a number of times was continuous reassessment.
Yeah.
It seemed to be something that pulled back to a couple of times, and I completely agree.
Yeah.
To the point where I was actually having a conversation with one of our colleagues yesterday or the day before that was surrounding our approach to problem solving. So this individual's got a lot of technical expertise in the field. I don't, but I have some expertise within my own sphere, particularly with solving some IT problems. And they were told the other day that the individuals who were experiencing issues had done X, Y, and Z. And so when they presented their solution, they said, "Oh no, that's not the solution. We've already tried that." And so he's like, "Okay, well, I'm pretty sure that's the problem, but if you don't want to listen to me, then that's fine. We won't explore it any further." And then it continued to be a problem until I got pulled in.
Right.
And it was the problem that the individual identified. And the people who said that they had tried that thing hadn't actually tried that thing because they didn't understand what exactly it was they were doing. And so we were talking about, for me, when it comes to these IT problems or any of the other problem solving I do, I trust the people I work with enough to hear what they say they've done and maybe even believe it, but I'm still going to go through my own mental checklist of things I know that have worked in the past, at least in this particular scenario, and it ended up being the case. And the individual I was talking to said the same was true of their time in the field. Any technician who had gone to a site previous to them may have said they've done X, Y, and Z, but they have a checklist that they go through at the very beginning because they don't want to solve the wrong problems for an entire day and then circle back to that one thing and find out like, oh, had I gone through my checklist, this wouldn't have been a problem for very long.
Yeah. And I think what you describe is like everything has layers. Things are simpler and equally more complex than we give them credit for, I think, in most scenarios. And that's something that obviously you do very well, which is sort of ask the right questions, consider as many variables as you possibly can. And in a scenario where maybe you don't have the technical expertise to consider the variables, you can use the Socratic method, ask questions of people who have the expertise in those domains, and sort of through that method, get them to consider the variables, the ones that you can't consider, but you can offer them questions that they can use in an effort to consider those variables. And I think that's something that a lot of people make. They make the mistake by stumbling on the first thing they think is the issue, the thing that's most glaringly obvious, and that's the thing they go with. If they see that this could solve the problem, they're not considering, are there other problems it creates? Is there second, third, fourth order of effects?
Sure.
Does it solve, if it solves problem 1, does that also solve 4, 5, and 12? And sometimes when we're looking for the root cause, we can find issues that are still issues. It's not to pretend that they're not,
Right.
but they're more symptoms than they are issues. And they would otherwise be solved once you find the root and you apply a solution to that root. It's very sort of philosophical in the way we're describing it. But you mentioned the reassessment, and I think that's important. So continuing to go back over the same rigors, ask the same questions to confirm, are the conditions still the same?
Right.
So when I read the chapter, there's a quote that I used to enter the chapter. It's one of my favorites, and it's, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for he is not the same man, and it is not the same river." And there's so much that we can unpack inside of that, because, you know, even if we feel like we're the same, we can't make the assumption that the river's the same.
Right.
And that could mean something as simple as, you know, has the current in the river changed? Are the same rocks in the same place at the bottom of the river? They're not. What's underneath the rocks? Is it sand? How stable is the sand? How deep is the river?
Right.
Did it rain? Has it increased? Not even considering how we have changed in our abilities. So maybe the first time we approach the river, it's a very narrow river. We could jump across the river. Over time, injuries, age, we can no longer jump. We have to traverse the river.
Yeah.
And so approaching every situation as if conditions have changed is, I think, one of the best things that you can do. And to your point, it's not necessarily a mistrust of your coworkers or
I have to
anything
take
like
a
that.
position of baseline ignorance when I enter into a situation, and I collect from every source possible.
Right.
So whether it's something somebody has said they've already done or me investigating to find out whether or not that's the case, there's still that baseline. I have no idea what's happening right now, but I want to find out everything that's happening.
Yeah, and so there's an objectiveness about that, and a topic that you've brought up previously. I think when we were talking about schools and school systems and stuff like that, you talked about curiosity, and I think curiosity plays an important role here. Looking for the root cause of a problem, you have to be curious, and what are you curious for? To me, and I mentioned this in the chapter, is this commitment to the truth. And I think there's a step there for all of us at every phase of our life where we need to intentionally make a commitment that I'm more curious about what is true than being right, or my ego
Sure.
inflated that I know the answer. Even if you think you know the answer, leaving room to be able to pivot
Right.
on what that is, and always have an open door that new information, new data can present itself.
Sure.
And at that point, I'm totally okay. I'm not tied to my idea. I'm not married to it, my thoughts, or what I think today to be true. And I think that's something that's missed quite a lot, because it's almost as if, well, if I get this wrong, then, or I admit to this thing that I've said to you as being wrong, is a reflection of me and my character. Well, I actually think the opposite is true. Like, I have a ton of respect for the person that throws up their hand and say, hey, I made a mistake. It looks like this is now the right answer. That's like, it's beautiful. The person who holds on to whatever they originally stated, and they won't let it go from their grips.
Right.
They might think that they're defending their character, their identity, or who they think people think they are, but that's not the case. I don't think ever, even for someone who hasn't intentionally thought about this so deeply, I think there's like an instinctual understanding for all of us that that's probably not good.
Yeah. The problem is when it happens unintentionally, when an individual may build part of their identity around a certain thing.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not even their own idea, but they are so deeply invested in believing that thing to be true. But that's probably a different conversation, yeah?
Yes. I'm sure the depth of that we can go into another time, but it still is a barrier or an obstacle for someone that is trying to do diagnostic testing to find out what the thing is. To be fair, this is why we have the book structured in a framework, working systematically like a flow chart from one thing to the other. It's the reason that courage and humility had to come before all of these things, because you can't get to a place to solve these problems unless you have the courage and the humility, amongst the others that we've already discussed. And so also in the same way that we've worked this into a flowchart, we also have a lot of experience and we've had a lot of discussions. It's in the book as well about systematizing some of the problems that you have once you've identified them. Solving problem one first, pouring your resources into solving one problem at a time. So for example, it's hard to diagnose something if you've not solved for humility. There's very little point in trying to figure out how you can get to the root of something if your ego is still so inflated. If you've not done that internal work, you're going to be in your own way. You become your own obstacle to the thing. And so pouring your resources into solving your own ego with humility first allows you to then go solve that one. Sometimes solving problem number one ends up solving problem 6, 7, 14, and so forth. And so it always baffles me, not just in business and sport and in parenting, when people try and pour their resources into multiple problems simultaneously. It just sort of, it seems so ineffective and very much like a misuse. If you pour everything into problem one, you indirectly solve these other problems.
Yeah, I'll add a slight note to that because I can't speak to it too much. I wanted to bring up a TED Talk that I watched the other day.
Yeah.
That was about self-reflection, but also this, I can't remember the gentleman's name, I'm sorry, but was talking about attention span.
Okay.
And how much attention span the average person actually has. Something to the effect of less than 50% of the people in the audience would actually be really paying attention to what he was saying. But he segued off of that to go into basically how multitasking is not feasible for most people. And I thought that was an interesting tie-in, just because, people tend to multitask all the time, especially at work. There's lots of tasks to be done, and I'm sure you and I have both seen what happens when people try to multitask too much. You don't really give any one of the problems, regardless of priority, enough attention, time, or care to really solve a problem properly, and you end up slowing yourself down. So I think there's I think you mentioned this is going to be the next chapter, but a priority assessment when it comes to decision making.
Yeah.
So I think that plays in really, really closely to just attention to detail broadly in solving problems.
Yeah, you made a great point, and it's something that, to be fair, I had tricked myself with for quite a long time professionally, that I could do multiple things concurrently. You can do multiple things, but you have to do them sort of one at a time.
Yeah.
And optimizing for the most important thing is part of the decision-making process. And again, that'll be the next chapter in the next podcast topic. But determining those is entirely based on understanding them at their base, at the core of what is the root cause. Once you do that, then you can start to put them in a systematic order.
Right.
Then you can start to reflect on them to determine, what should be number one and number two. But you can't do that without going through the rigors of determining what the actual cause is. And this type of problem solving and using attention to detail in the problem solving, this shows up in every aspect. In the book, I talk about how it shows up in business. Obviously, if you start solving the wrong problems, then you're going to pour a ton of resources, financial, time, team members, into solving the wrong problem. And it's not just that you're wasting the resources, it's that you're moving forward thinking that it's solved while it continues to fester or become much greater of a problem. And, same with parenting. If you're solving the wrong problems as a parent, the biggest thing you end up losing is time.
Right.
And time is the most precious commodity we have in general, but especially as a parent. I can't go anywhere without an older parent, a grandparent, seeing our boys and saying, "Sir, please enjoy every moment you have with them."
Sure.
It goes so fast.
Yeah.
We went away recently, and at least 20, 30 different people in like a week said the exact same thing. And that continues to happen all the time. And so when it comes to parenting, of course, all of us from the bottom of our heart want to raise strong, healthy, beautiful children. And in doing so, we're going to come across problems. It's figuring out what is the right one.
Right.
Why are they acting out? There's
Sure.
usually an underlying cause within the behaviors. And in many ways, we have to start by looking at ourselves as parents. Are we neglecting something they need from us? So instead of responding with anger and discipline, of course, there's times where that's appropriate, but starting by some introspection or objectively being curious about, okay, what's creating the conditions for this behavior to exist?
Right.
And start to look for it with curiosity allows us to solve the right one. Otherwise, we could go months, years with an idea, a decision of how to solve a problem and never actually solve it and create potential friction, problems, and waste very valuable and precious time.
Right. And then there are also the problems that are maybe not yours to solve. I can't really speak to that in a parenting context because I'm not experienced. But certainly in business or in team settings, when roles are very clearly defined, you can often see people trying to solve a problem that ultimately it's not a waste of time if it results in something positive, but it's an incorrect allocation of time when they should be focusing on something else.
Yeah, totally. I think you touched on something really important in business. Obviously, this is something that we've had to solve for in our experiences, where and most things that people do come from a really wonderful place. They're trying to help. They're trying to do good, and sometimes it creates more problems by trying to solve a problem that's not yours to solve.
Right.
And that could show up as taking time out of your scheduled day to solve a problem that maybe no one knows exists. You're doing it on your own accord. That's great. That's initiative. But there's a bit of a friction there, a paradox. Yeah. Initiative is great, but under what circumstances? And so by the end of the week, you've not completed the tasks that you need to complete, or you've solved the problem, but you've not actually tackled the underlying issue. This is probably something you and I have seen the most.
Yeah.
And what that does for business leaders is it sort of robs them of the opportunity to actually find the underlying problem and solve it. How many times will someone do something and say, you know what, it's not a big deal. I'm just going to solve this thing. I'll do it for them. I'll take over it, and it's whatever. It allows a problem to persist.
Right.
And persist and fester and fester. And that can then show up and create new problems like resentment. It can impact the culture of a business. And this is true for athletic teams as well. It doesn't matter. It could be soccer, it could be basketball, football. It doesn't matter. And that's why it's, there is that paradox of, if I'm working on something and I see a problem, yes, maybe there's moments where I should solve it. And then there's also moments where I should just flag it. I can propose a solution that I think would be relevant, and maybe they might say, hey, great. But now they're at least aware that it exists, and they can pay attention to, is the solution actually working?
Right.
Because that's part of that reassessment you brought up at the beginning. It's like, part of the diagnosis is that you have to continue to reevaluate whatever the solution is, because again, you have to leave room, and that's where that humility comes in, that this seems like it's the right answer, but I still need to pay attention, because sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes part of the data you need to collect and to pay attention to is, well, is the solution working or is it not?
Right. And then there's also the pursuit of perfection mindset, tying into solving a problem that's not yours to solve. You could deviate from a standard operating procedure, feeling as though you're developing something that works better, but you don't see the impact or fallout that has for people down the line within the system. So again, just worth thinking about, if you are an individual who is maybe trying to solve a problem that you think is potentially out of your wheelhouse in terms of a hierarchy standpoint, is to start thinking in those additional magnitudes of effect. If you think you can improve something, you need to make sure that it improves or solves a problem for everybody and not just yourself.
Yeah. And that's sort of the big picture thinking. This is kind of why, outside of where it's meaningful for me personally, David Epstein's book Range I find so fascinating, just from like a business standpoint, is he's really the first person that put forth the idea to me of like a true generalist. And that's a person that is thinking broadly. Oftentimes, whether it's like a formal specialty or something, if you're in a role, you're probably the specialist of that role.
Yeah.
And the challenge there is everything can look like a nail to a hammer. And so you might see a problem, and it might be a problem for you, but there's 20 other people that are involved. And the problem that it creates for you was the solution for 7 other people.
Right.
And so it was worth creating the problem for one to solve for the 7. It's still net in the broad sphere of things. It still nets as an efficiency.
Yeah.
By improving the system for the organization and for the team. But it might hinge on something new that seems like a problem for that one person in that flow.
Right.
And so that's why communication's important, and empathy. You know, I'd thought about writing a chapter solely on empathy. Maybe that happens. But I feel like empathy is just sort of like attached to each of these along the way.
Like a prerequisite.
Yeah, exactly. Now that's a tough prerequisite.
Yeah, for sure.
to ask for, but you know, the book itself is pretty broad. But you know, just I think at least here where this doesn't have to be empathy of the individuals in this flow, but it's empathizing through just understanding what each person's role is and recognizing that, okay, there's a net solution here. It's just thinking beyond yourself.
Yeah, if you wanted to make it cold and clinical, it's really just understanding that there is going to be a cause and effect and potentially additional effects for every decision that you make.
Yeah. Yeah. And this will be talked about more in decision making, but again, you solve one problem, you sometimes create the conditions for a new problem, and that has to be reassessed. But there might be a trade-off there that's worth trading off.
Yeah. There's also problems versus preferences. You know, like
explain.
You may think it's a problem, but it's not really a problem. You know, like a minor inconvenience where you make a mountain out of a molehill.
Sure.
And so you blow up a standard operating procedure, for example, for something that's only slightly convenient for you.
Right.
I feel like we've pretty well covered that off in different words, but I like thinking about that in terms of is it really a problem or is it a preference?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. And again, like all of these things, and all of these, every step requires some self-reflection. A lot of questions to ask of yourself. Unemotional questions where you're thinking objectively, and to your point, you know, is this really a large issue? Or is this just something new and I don't like new things? It's an inconvenience of adding something new to my workload that I didn't have previously. It's nothing major, but it's annoying.
I really liked the bathroom example.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought that was great. I don't know if you want to disclose that during the podcast or leave it for the book, but I do think it's a really fun example.
Happy to share the story because I think it's one of the best examples as a metaphor to explain what transferable everything is. And something that actually just came to mind is there's an importance of the story. So the story, it took place during basic training. Now, it seems like something to scoff at because basic training is just basic training. It's simple, it's basic, and yet still one of the most profound lessons I've ever learned came within that experience. And that's kind of part of the message for transferable everything, which is that it doesn't have to be this large, impactful moment in your life. It can be from the smallest thing. So in basic training, as most people know, you have to do, room inspections. Your t-shirts and your socks all have to be folded a particular way with your name written a particular way. It's all pre-prescribed. You just have to do it. They inspect you on it. They throw your clothes around when it's not right or because that's the phase of basic training you're
I'm sure it's really fun for the officers.
Oh, the marching NCOs have to have a blast.
For sure.
And certainly, I'm sure it's very performative. Sometimes not. Sometimes it has to be. And so there is this moment for me where every day, typically one person is assigned to be like the senior person of the platoon. And really what that means is that, you're kind of responsible for whatever happens. During the morning inspection, that means you have a clipboard and you walk around with whoever's doing the inspections and they find the deficiencies and they point them out. You take note of them. They use that as a way to punish you, whether it's push-ups, running, stairs, whatever, they have in the back of their mind as punishment for the day. And in this scenario, we walked into one of the platoon bathrooms, and I was pretty cocky when it came to cleaning bathrooms, because I grew up cleaning bathrooms at home, and my mom would inspect them, which is in hindsight brilliant that she would do that. But she would inspect them and point out areas where myself or my sister had missed something. We would fix it. She would come back and so forth. It was a great teaching tool, and so I felt really confident. And so I walked in there, chin up, chest out, shoulders back, like, all right, we got this one. He's not going to get anything on us. And I see him searching around, and I can tell he's not finding anything. And I'm starting to build more and more confidence, like, oh yeah, he's got nothing on us. And then he grabs the cap that covers the toilet seat hinge, rips it off, looks inside, and then he shows it to me. And it's pretty gross in there. Grosser than like a tiny speck that would otherwise translate it into 25 push-ups or whatever. It's actually genuinely gross. And, in part he had to find something, I'm sure, which he did. It was humbling, of course. And I don't know why, but something inside of me, which is uncharacteristic of the moment. Like, it's not something you would typically do during basic training, which is like to ask a question. And I said to him, Sergeant, what's the point? And so he looks at me and he's like, what trade are you going to go into? So I said, combat engineer, proudly. And then he looked at me and he said, well, and he had just got back from Afghanistan. So he said, over there, in reference to Afghanistan, over there, your job is going to be to see things that no one else sees in places no one thinks to look. He was referring to IEDs, a responsibility, a job for combat engineers. And that just made so much sense to me. And he said, it starts here. If you can't do it in the bathroom, how are you going to be able to do that over there? And this light went off in my mind, and it's stuck with me ever since. What I realized is that is transferable everything. Attention to detail is and always will be attention to detail. That's what that exercise was. It wasn't cleaning the bathroom for the sake of cleaning the bathroom. It was cleaning the bathroom to build and evaluate someone's ability to pay attention to details. Now, of course, it's easy to understand why that's applicable for a combat engineer. Real consequences, that makes sense. But that also shows up in every other thing we do. So, you can attest to this. If we're looking through a contract or a spreadsheet with data, almost like an infinite amount of data, it seems.
Yeah.
Attention to detail is attention to detail. Your ability to read through or analyze the thing and find something that no one else can see and sort of problem solve and look for the root of something. So if, on a data table, the end numbers don't seem to make sense, they're not adding up to what you expected, then you start to ask more questions and you start to work backwards. And then you find that there is a break in one of the cell formulas or, whatever the case may be.
Sure.
And that idea opened up. Out of that, continued to expand in business, as a volunteer firefighter, as a parent, in literally everything in my life. Attention to detail shows up. It's a virtue that we can actually build on.
Right.
And that's the point of transferable everything, is intentionally figuring out what are the virtues that apply here, holding those to your identity, and applying them into every domain of your life. Too often, if I use this example of the military, that transition from, military back to civilian, one of the hardest parts of that is figuring out who you are when you take the uniform off. It doesn't matter how long you served for. You go through training that sort of structures your identity with the institution of the military for good reason, and you build on that. A lot of your confidence is built within that framework of being a soldier with discipline, attention to detail, and all of those things. It doesn't matter the mechanism of which you built those things. Those are yours. Those are now part of your identity. Just because the uniform comes off doesn't mean you don't get to keep that discipline. It was still yours. You were the one that woke up at 5 a.m. You were the one that focused on building your attention to detail, accepting the punishment for missing something in the washroom or not folding your t-shirt correctly or whatever the case is. And you built on that. Those are yours for forever if you can intentionally bring them with you.
Right.
Tie those to your identity, not the uniform, as you're going through that transition. The same thing is true for athletes. You take off that athletic uniform, everything you learned on the pitch is still yours.
Yeah.
And all of the things you learned are equally applicable in every other part of your life, in your relationships, from friends to a spouse, romantic relationships, parenting, business, whether you're at an entry-level position or you're sort of a lead project manager, director, senior leadership, whatever the case may be, you get to take everything. And they're building blocks that you can continue to build on. The attention to detail in the bathroom, I was able to continue to build on that in every other part of my life.
Right.
And I recognize that it exists and brought it with me. And so, anyways, that's the story.
Sure.
It's in the book, and I just think that I wanted to share it because I think it is a beautiful example, a metaphor for what the intention behind transferable everything is meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, particularly just in its direct applicability to attention to detail. And I want to rephrase something, which is attention to detail for me is attention to all details.
Right.
And the way I want to put that forward is, and we've said this before, whether we're talking about an individual or a sports team or a business team, et cetera, there are no small roles. Every role is important. Every detail is important.
Yeah.
And every detail is a data point.
Yes.
If it would be a disservice not to account for all data points.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'm glad you brought that up because I wasn't initially thinking about that. And I don't know that it's fully reflected in the chapter. And so it might be worth adding. And in our attempts to solve problems and pay attention to things that are happening, looking for the root, I think oftentimes we fumble on, what someone thought was an insignificant data point. And you said it, there are no insignificant ones. Every data point.
If it exists, it has some significance.
That's right. And so I think that's also kind of empowering as a reminder for everyone, no matter what role you're playing in an organization. It doesn't matter how significant or insignificant you think it is. It is significant. It exists for a reason.
Sure.
Someone has hired you for a reason. You are a participant towards an objective.
Right.
You play a role. It might not be the role that you want to play, but at the same time, as long as you're playing that role and you are contributing to the team, and it gives you an opportunity to demonstrate all of the virtues, character, and every other thing that we were talking about through the work that you're doing. I think it's a bit of a tangent, but a lot of people think that, okay, well, I'm only going to apply these things when it matters to me. And I think that's a lie that people tell themselves. It always matters. Every job matters. And every job is an opportunity to build on the back of, to learn new things, or to demonstrate to yourself, not just your coworkers or your bosses or whatever the case may be. It's to prove to yourself that you are who you say you are.
Yeah.
You have the skills you say you have. But if you sort of throw caution to the wind as if, well, I only demonstrate these things if I'm getting paid enough or if I have the right job, then they're not tied to you. You're sort of like, it's, you think you might have them, but you're borrowing them if you think you do.
Right.
They're tied to you and your identity, these virtues and characteristics, if you consistently, with intention, apply them at all times in everything that you do.
Sure. Especially when we're talking about systems and modes and methods. You and I have spoken about this before. If you aren't wholly committed to a way of doing something, then you are going to receive inconsistent feedback and misattribute wins or losses, and you end up incorrectly reinforcing certain patterns. So if you're not wholeheartedly committed to acting out this way in all things at all times, your system is broken. And so you can never truly let it win or let it fail.
Yeah, that's, in business operations, that's something we've discussed quite a lot because oftentimes people, a new initiative is presented, let's say. So there's a new initiative, we need to do things in this particular way. And you might think to yourself, that doesn't make sense. And credit, maybe it doesn't make sense.
Sure.
The problem is if you don't commit to it, you never allow the problem to rise to the surface.
Right.
If you don't commit to it and it still doesn't work, but it's clear or someone stumbles on the fact that you weren't committed to it, then that might misrepresent as the root cause that we're describing. And so the time of going in the wrong direction continues to extend and extend.
Yes.
Everyone's commitment to the thing is what will allow the people that need to assess whether it works or it doesn't work. Or even if you want to present that it doesn't work because someone's not seen it, you could go look at all the data points, including your own, where you've committed to it and say, look, it looks like this doesn't work. Maybe I'm missing something. I'm open to that. But this is kind of what I'm seeing. Can you help me see something different?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, if you're not the person doing the work and just watching the work be done, and you throw on your analyst hat and you try to figure out if something is going wrong or is not going wrong, and people are telling you, well, we're following the system to a T, and then so your data points are incorrect. You know, like if they aren't following the system in earnest but are providing you with feedback suggesting that they are, then your analysis is then skewed as well.
Right. And that just kind of ties right back to every data point is there for a reason.
Right.
It informs something. And it's the collection of the data points that allows us to make good decisions, to contextualize whatever we have to analyze. And context is an important part of paying attention to things. So you might pay attention to a friend who seems to be sort of similar to the child, sort of acting in a different way. So you've paid attention, you've noticed a change in their behavior. But now you have to figure out like why. Why is there a change in their behavior? If you just take it as a change in behavior and think, you know what, I don't like the way they're behaving, I'm just gonna cut them off.
Right.
I don't need that type of person in my life. Well, you might have also then just failed to be the friend that they need. The person you think you are to be supportive and helpful to a friend in need, because you've completely dismissed, you've not looked beyond the surface, you've not peeled back enough layers, you weren't curious enough to find out, what's the real reason there's a change in the behavior?
Sure.
Something maybe they're too embarrassed to talk about. Whether you think it's embarrassing or not, to them it is.
Right.
And you need to go on a journey, ask questions. That's the Socratic method. Using a set of questions to kind of peel back some of the layers, work deeper and deeper in a non-evasive way, with respect, giving them dignity.
Sure.
And hopefully uncovering something.
Right. And I mean, like in that example, there is a significant data set that you don't have access to, which is everything that's happening inside the dome.
Right.
And it's up to that individual whether or not they're going to disclose or provide you with that data.
Exactly.
So there are some circumstances where you're going to need to fill in the gaps.
Yes, exactly. While recognizing that even if there's a probability that how you filled in the gaps is correct, there's room
100%.
that I don't actually know definitively. And sometimes someone might tell you something and they don't even know because
Sure.
we're so complex. Maybe they think it's this within themselves and they still need someone to help peel back more layers to recognize it's actually this.
Yeah. It's like you were saying, continuous reassessment is necessary everywhere and always.
Yeah. And
We can't take things for granted.
that's right. That's right. That's perfectly put.
There was a really fun thing that popped into my head, which is really unserious.
Okay.
But you were talking about basic training,
Yeah.
and I want to put forth the notion that no training is basic. All training is training.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I'm kind of glad. Like there's a little bit inside of me that is a little bit scared to share that story because, you know, in say some of the military culture, you'd sort of be scoffed at to share a story from basic training as a war story, if you will, and you know something that
I've been in some wretched bathrooms.
And yes, I've not deployed as a soldier, and so my war stories are only from training.
Yeah.
However, that I'm kind of happy that that's the case because I want to encourage everybody to, you don't have to have deployed as a soldier to a battlefield in order to learn valuable lessons,
Yeah.
right? Like the example is Jocko Willink or Eric Davis. Each of them, Jocko's book, Dichotomy of Leadership, contrasting, you know, what he learned in battle or as a Navy SEAL, and the contrast to business. Eric Davis wrote the book Raising Men. Same thing, contrasting battlefield principles, Navy SEAL principles to parenting.
Yeah.
And that is transferable everything, the act of what they're doing. The thing that the book attempts to solve, and that my hope is that we can solve, is how to help everybody think in those terms.
Right.
And the basic training version of their incredible experiences is that I want to encourage everybody that that same act can happen from, like, you know, the cliche, you know, don't cry over spilled milk, right? Something so simple that happens like every day, everything around us is sort of like a classroom as we move through the world. Everything is an opportunity to learn a very large lesson about attention to detail in something as simple and seemingly stupid as cleaning a bathroom.
Yeah.
And I see the same thing being true for athletics. One of the most beautiful thing about sport is it's not just sport. It's a window into so many of the realities of life. Within sports, you can learn every lesson you need to learn in life, almost, at least at a principled level, mostly, if you're paying attention.
Sure.
If you're trying to look beneath the surface and understand everything that it's trying to teach you. The continuous term that we use over and over again is intentionality.
Yeah. Yeah. When we were going over the chapter before this, that was something that I did note, right? Which you bringing up Jocko and so forth in your examples, you were talking about unexploded ordnance and fires. You know, there's a level of novelty in there for the person who hasn't experienced those things, which certainly pulls you in as a reader or a listener. You're like, I'm going to pay attention to this. This is new information, really meaty stuff. But I was wondering, you know, like, I thought the toilet example was so good because it is, while he compared it to a battlefield scenario and why attention to detail is important, it is a more mundane thing. And a lot of scenarios, the stakes aren't going to be unexploded ordnance, fire. So how do I make my decision making around my attention to detail, or around the mundane things? So thinking in terms of how we elevate the stakes at all times. I guess putting an importance on attention to detail at all times. Why is it important for the average person?
Well, I think in a perfect world, I think deciding the outcome that you want and whether attention to detail is required. Towards the end of the book, we actually get into, sort of like the right tools for the right job and being selective about them. Every chapter, courage, humility, all these things we've talked about. And even though there's a framework, it's also paradoxical because they're tools, they're virtues that we all hold and possess individually.
Yeah.
And so if you're thinking about, at least from my perspective, attention to detail, I'll give an example with cleaning, not for the sake of an inspection, but for my house. Most of us have gone through, we sort of do surface level cleans. We clean it so it kind of looks nice, the countertops. But every time we clean, we don't pull out the fridge, we don't pull out the oven to clean in behind or down the sides and the back.
Like purifying the space.
Right, right. And so like, if that was the case, if that was the intention of the outcome we wanted to achieve, then I would say for this instance, you need to apply attention to detail because the outcome is you're trying to purify the space.
Yeah.
If it's simply, I just need to clean, surface level clean, then, I can reasonably be okay to kind of, park the tool of attention to detail.
Yeah.
I only need a sufficient amount to ensure I've got the bacteria off of the counter.
Right on.
So no one's going to get sick. And same, it's an allocation of a resource.
Yeah.
Right. So the same thing, if I was to use a business example, something that you and I might partner on, and I might say like, okay, this isn't a huge issue. We don't have a lot of time to allocate towards it. So the depth of which we go into it is predicated based on the outcome and the things the resources we have allocated to it. And then there's other scenarios where in the evaluation, I'm like, this is really big. This is important. We're going to put a lot of time and energy and thoughtfulness behind this. And we're going to go into our toolbox and we're going to pull out attention to detail and we're going to slap that tool down and we're going to make sure that we go through it.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's really important that we discuss those guardrails and are really rigorous about it later in the book as well.
Yeah.
Because you have two things at odds, which are, like as we said, all data is important. Everything must be considered. And then, damn, I got 24 hours in a day,
Yeah.
So I want to consider all data at all times, but I'm going to have to narrow my focus.
Yes.
I won't be able to open my eyes as wide as possible and take in everything unless it's my specific task to do so.
That's right. And that's why when, if we look at attention to detail, so if I'm a leader and I see that you have missed some things, right? It might be the case that you're not capable of doing the thing I've asked. I've not trained you well, or I've not clearly articulated why you need to do the thing you need to do, and determining what those things are, but helping you understand that, hey, this is your job to do these things. You need to apply this tool to this job, attention to detail. These data points matter. And so communicating that so you know that. So my job is to help you, not just to communicate what you need to do, but help you understand not just the importance or that it's your job, but that this is fundamental to everything that comes after. And so you can apply, ultimately, I guess, the importance of what I'm asking of you. Because if I just leave that level of importance up to you, then you're going to put it through your own lens, your own filtering mechanism to determine whether you think it's that important. Part of my job is to help you orientate the things that are important and in what sequential order we need to tackle them. That's every leader's job. It's your job as a parent. to help your kids understand the things that are important, why we have to do these things in these particular orders.
As you know, I studied theater. The underlying principle is that if something is on stage or on TV or a book or even on your person, like I see you're wearing a necklace right now, there is an assumed level of due diligence or intention in how that thing was done.
Right.
And so I'm sure you've heard the phrase, a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yes.
So you can look at something that's got details, and then each detail has hundreds more details possibly associated with it. Like symbols.
Yeah.
You're wearing a Nike hat, I'm wearing a wedding ring. What can you infer from that? That these are like basic examples, but it's all to say, when you say attention to detail, there are levels to how much attention to detail you're going to pay,
Yeah.
and how far you can look into something if you're afforded the time to do it.
Right.
Because there's going to be text and then subtext.
Yes. And I think there's additional layers like onto that. Like, okay, so I intentionally wear the crucifix. I'm Catholic. I'm proud to be Catholic, and so I intentionally wear it. But I also know a lot of people that wear a crucifix because they started wearing one when they were younger, and so the intentionality began there. And so you might think, oh, they're intentionally doing what I'm doing. You know, proud to wear it, proud to have it.
Yeah.
It's something meaningful to them. But it began that way, but it's just become a custom that they do. It's a habit that they don't even know why they do it anymore. And so there is still a trick for attention to detail. And I think that's where that sort of like window of I could be wrong.
Yeah.
You could go to that depth, but you leave room to be wrong because it still could be just that.
Right.
They started that when they were a kid.
Sure.
And they just continue to wear it to this day.
Yep.
But the probability that you're right or you're onto something or it's led you in a particular direction is going to be of some value.
Sure. But within that, I think there are some things I would be able to tell about an individual regardless of what the symbol says.
Sure, like what?
So I don't know whether or not you're Catholic in this example,
Okay.
but you're wearing jewelry regardless. So you like to decorate yourself. You've taken some level of care in wanting to put a thing around your neck. Now, I'm not going to suggest what that might mean.
Sure.
But it opens up the door to more and more possibilities.
Yeah. No, I think that's good and that's important. But you hit on something that I think is the most important. You've observed and you've asked questions, but you've not applied intent.
I'm accepting that there are possibilities beyond what my initial assumptions may be.
Yeah. Which I think is important. Too often I see in the sort of problem-solving diagnostic phase, people might find details, but then they're applying their own intention behind them or why somebody is doing a thing. And I think that's where we can easily go wrong. And it can be a mistake. But you're right. It can open the door for more questions, more possibilities, greater depth.
Yeah.
And I think that's where like the Socratic method becomes so important. Is with each new answer comes each new possibility of asking a deeper and deeper question.
Yeah. Yeah, I can pull it back to some of the things I remember hearing in English class in high school, where the teacher would go, oh, the drapes were red in this particular story. Why does that matter? People would blow it off and be like, what do you mean? It doesn't matter. It was the color of fabric.
Right.
Well, the author put it in the book for a reason, so there must be some level of significance. Even if it doesn't push the plot forward or doesn't push the thesis forward, they arrived there for some particular reason. And we may never know what that reason is, but it just offers more possibility.
Right. Okay, so I'm curious to explore this actually with you a little bit because I think there's some scenarios, like you said, where it may not offer something. So say the author wrote that the curtains were red. Is that just because they needed to describe a scene so it felt tangible?
Right.
Or the reader could imagine it, or is there an intent behind that? Sort of a secret message.
Right. Yeah.
Kind
Like,
of.
is it a throwaway? Are they just describing the space and that they happen to choose that color? Are they going to refer to it later in the book? Or is the color red going to become a theme throughout the book? And does it mean something more?
Right.
Are you going to hit the conclusion and be like, oh, I remember that thing from the beginning?
Right. And a callback.
Yeah. Or it means absolutely nothing at all.
Okay. So without the author determining that, how do you discern whether it is of value or not? I can sort of imagine, and I've not been in this scenario, of your theater program, of you guys doing a study and sort of like analyzing this, and everyone's sort of like coming up with a reason why, and it's sort of this artistic process of trying to analyze all of the smallest details, which is really fascinating and cool. But like, do you ever actually know the answer if the author's not provided their intent in some like post-editorial or something?
Well, I don't know, because I guess the answer depends on the question you're asking. So if it makes me feel a certain way and allows me to come to a conclusion that I can support with some level of evidence, then there is a level of truth into that, regardless of what the author or the production team's intent was.
That's a good point.
So like for instance, I can't remember what year it was in, but I wrote a paper. I had to go see a show and then write about it, and then write about some of the choices that they made and how that reinforced certain themes of the thing.
Right.
So I remember, I'm going to butcher this big time, but I specifically noted a hat, the use of tissue paper, and honestly can't remember the other things, but there was a character that was poor, and they were trying to, they were like dehumanizing the individual, basically showing how they're a lesser individual compared to the rich people, and they were using certain things to do that. And it was just a really basic thing. Like it was a rickety hat that was mimed as if it had a bug infestation in it, which they were basically being like, well, poor people have dirty stuff. They're likely infested with things, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
That one was a very obvious choice because that's what the play was about.
Right.
If I were to critique the color of the drapes and try to like extract something from that, I don't know.
Right. And I guess then it's the value of, is that necessary for the sake of discovering something? So it's applying the right tool, not just for the right
Again, if I'm
issue,
looking
but at
for
the right
something, I can probably find it. Even if the
Okay.
person who put the things there didn't intend for it to be there. You could likely make a case for what it could be.
Interesting. Give me an example.
Well, I mean, I'm wearing a wedding ring.
Right.
Why?
Because you're married and it's important that everyone knows that you are married. And it signals to other women that you're off the market, and to your wife that you're committed to everything you stated on the altar, presumably. And yeah, leave it there.
Now, if you had like a bird's eye view into my life, maybe you would see that, and this is not the case. So, but there's some infidelity going on.
Sure.
And the reason why I'm wearing this is because it helps keep up appearances. Just because it's there doesn't always mean it's there for the thing that conventional wisdom would say it is there for.
Okay, so let me challenge that a little bit. So in the particular made-up scenario that you came up with,
Sure. Sorry, Jess.
yeah. So in that scenario, it's keeping up appearances, but you are committed. You've just failed at the commitment. What about that scenario? So it sounded like, anyways, the way that you were originally stating it is like there's intentional infidelity. You don't care,
Right.
and you're just only keeping it there for the appearance. But what about between that? You are committed. You've made an error, and so it still symbolizes the same thing, but the infidelity still existed.
Well, there's also a question of would I be able to live with myself if I did that to her? And
Sure.
would I be able to keep up a ruse? Probably not.
Right.
Knowing myself, I would have to tell her right away, and that would likely be the end of things.
Sure. Sure.
You know, so it all depends on what the author wants in some respects, and then there's also what the reader will pick up on for their own reasons. So outside of what it symbolizes from like a relationship standpoint, why is it gold? Of all the materials I could have chosen, I went with gold. Does that mean I'm a traditionalist? I've got pirate fantasies and I like wearing jewelry. You know? There's a lot of weird stuff going on where
Sure.
like the reader or viewer can make inferences that are either correct or incorrect, but if you can find or justify some truth in it regardless of what the author intended, you can make a case for it.
Sure. Now, is for the author or the writer, if they leave too much room and they don't intentionally include certain details, does that the room they left change the outcome of what they want the reader to experience? Is that why they include it as well? So you and I can read the same thing, and every gap that exists that the writer didn't intentionally fill, we're going to add different things.
Right.
Which means even if it's minor details, it's going to play into changing the outcome, the experience that we have reading that book.
Sure. And is it because they're a poor author, or is it because they actually left space to give the reader an opportunity to fill those gaps themselves?
Right. In my case, poor author.
Well,
and that's a great question.
yeah.
I think what's beautiful about kind of what we just workshopped in real time is that there's lots of questions to ask. Lots of questions, new
Tons.
layers. And that's sort of like the Socratic method at work. All it is questions, exploration, continuing. And, you know, this is something that's bothered me for quite a long time. I don't want to fully return to the school aspect, but it's felt like something that was discouraged. It's like, here's the material I need to teach you. I always found myself being like, okay, but why? But why? But why? I was that kid, I guess. But I always wanted to know why. Why is this important? Is this really what happened? I wanted to ask all of these questions. And I think we've
Been like, this is above my pay grade, kid.
yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah, there's a book. Someone told me I need to read it to you and explain it and then test you on your ability to regurgitate it. Obviously, I know there's some wonderful teachers out there that, you know, that will go on that journey with you.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like it's it feels like it's the exception, not the rule. Where I think children, especially, but all of us would benefit from sort of having an open forum to ask and explore and be curious. And I think from my experience anyways, being a parent, kids are so curious. I felt like that sort of flame got diminished quite a lot.
Oh, no.
And so I've become really obsessed about trying to protect the flame that my kids have for curiosity, a thirst for knowledge. And anyways, I think that it's actually critical for everything we're discussing. If you don't have a thirst for knowledge, or said differently, the objective truth, if you don't have this insatiable curiosity, then attention to detail is going to be challenging, because you're going to stumble on the thing. It's going to feel like work. You're going to stumble on the first answer and think, I've done my job. That's it.
Yeah.
I don't need to go anywhere from there. And so I think I think it's really important for leaders in business, parents, coaches, especially teachers, every chance you can, encourage that thirst for knowledge. Really support curiosity, even if it's a little bit frustrating because the kid like me is asking why a million times and sort of going downstream with them.
You're like, I'd love to answer that, but in 10 years.
It all leads to the attention to detail, the problem solving.
Yeah.
And
even pulling back though to what we just did, like,
yeah,
just again bringing up the importance of guardrails.
yeah,
Because like if I'm focused too much on those red drapes, I might be missing the actual important content also.
sure. And I think that's why teaching these things is important. Is like, so much of being a parent isn't about doing the thing for the child. It's not about, and same with being a business leader. It's not, you're not supposed to be the bottleneck. You're not supposed to be the one doing the things. You're supposed to set the guardrails. You're supposed to say, okay, here's your left and rights of arcs. Stay within that. This is what we want to accomplish. Here's your responsibilities, and go. Same with being a parent, and teaching is about exactly that, setting those guardrails. So it's like, okay, we want to explore the red drapes in this book for a moment. Let's go through the exercise of asking questions. Okay, we've not really landed on anything. Okay, let's put a pin in that. Let's tuck that aside. Let's continue to explore the book.
Yeah.
And maybe through that, we'll end up discovering that it wasn't really important anyways. But we've kind of gone through that exercise of asking some questions. We don't need to go into an insane amount of depth.
Yeah.
It's really not led to anything. Put a pin in it, park it off to the side, continue to move forward. And that's where you allow new data. That's like the reassessment.
Yeah.
As you've worked through the book, that's reassessing. Is there anything really applicable to those red drapes? I don't see any callback. Okay,
Sure.
we can kind of move on.
Yeah, I think it's more just accepting the possibility that they could be important, which
Yeah.
again is all data is data.
Right.
It's not necessarily going to be a device within the story, so to say, that is super important, but accepting the possibility that it could be just means you don't lose track of that as you move forward.
Yeah. And it's just an act of remaining open.
Sure.
Open heart, open mind, anything is possible.
Right.
And that's just a contributing factor to the commitment to whatever might be true. Do you think there's a correlation with someone's ability to do this and their own sort of cognitive abilities? Or do you think that the attention to detail is something that anyone can work on? Because it's simply questions to ask.
Yeah.
It's an openness. Or is it highly dependent on what we sort of call IQ right now?
Yeah. So there are obviously a percentage factor at the beginning of that scale.
Sure.
Up into a certain point, there are legitimate reasons why somebody might not be trainable.
Sure.
But no, I think that attention to detail or being able to train somebody on their attention to detail, if they don't have it innately or it's not something that they choose to do, comes down to reframing the importance or the stakes behind those details. So if you have a gambling addict, they're going to learn every detail, presumably, about the card game that they're playing because it will increase their odds of success.
Right.
So somebody working at McDonald's, for example, as an entry-level line cook, is not going to be hyper-obsessive over everything they do and trying to perfect every detail down to the minutia because they're just making burgers.
Yeah.
Surely there are some who maybe do. And I've been a person who's worked an entry-level job and has taken a lot of pride in the things that I do because I've understood that there are no small tasks.
I can attest to that.
Everything is part of the broader organism. Everything is important. But not everybody sees everything as being that important or as the stakes being that high.
Sure.
I know, for instance, I have a stress problem because I treat unimportant things as being important things.
Yeah.
Some people may not treat anything importantly, but I would be generalizing to say so. Based on what I've observed, people are all across the spectrum are capable of being trained on up to a very significant level of competence on a lot of things. But when it comes to attention to detail, if it's not a selfish attention to detail, something that is enriching to the individual, they need to be given a reason to treat those details with a level of respect in another way.
Right.
In way too many words, I've basically said that, it comes down to the stakes.
Yeah.
Why are the details important?
Right.
These are why they should be important to you, even if they're not important to you.
So in part, it's the right tool for the right job
Sure.
at the right time.
Yeah.
And maybe a bit of that is sort of like the, I think, was it Charlie Munger that says, show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome.
Yeah.
Maybe something like that. So if someone's incentivized enough, they're going to be more committed to the outcome.
Sure.
Therefore, they're going to deploy the right tool for the right job at the right time because the outcome.
And the incentive can be so many different things.
Right.
Like, is the incentive at the end of the journey, I'm enriched? And how am I enriched? Is it through money, through experience, through et cetera? You have to choose what's important to you. And I think that's why we noted vision as being so important near the beginning.
Yeah.
So I think your vision and your goal setting at the beginning of your journey through this ultimately determines how much attention you pay to those details. Because if the outcome matters to you, it's a disservice to not pay attention to the details. I don't know how relevant this is, but going back to the bathroom cleaning example.
Yeah.
There is, while you may think there's a generally, like an accepted definition of what cleanliness is. I'm sure you've been to some friends' houses, right? Where you're like, oh, geez. But they're like, nah, man, it's clean. What do you mean? So I think that's going back to the stakes conversation, right? Someone may think that they're upholding a level of a certain standard because that's what's meaningful to them. And so maybe they have paid what they think is an acceptable level of attention to those things, and there's just a misalignment with where you feel the standard should be.
Yeah, totally. And that's part of, again, bringing it back to leadership, business, parenting, teaching, doesn't matter. Your job is to set the expectations, to make sure everybody understands what they are, what they look like.
Yeah.
You're giving them a model. And that's why one of the most important parts about training somebody in anything, and this is sort of the dichotomy of leadership ideas, like you're kind of in the weeds with them. You might be doing the thing first, then you're passing it off to them, you're paying close attention. You continue to work further backwards. So you're sort of back into like a broad vision of not just the one person, but everybody. And then you kind of pay attention as to whether they're fulfilling and they're meeting the obligation. As soon as you notice that they're not, you kind of step back in. And that's very clearly applicable to your example, where you go to someone's house. I have a set of expectations of what's clean to me.
Right.
And to be fair, someone who cleans houses to prepare them for sale.
Yeah, like stagers.
Yeah. They might come into my house.
Yeah,
you're
like, dude.
Yeah, this is embarrassing.
You didn't even pull the fridge off the wall.
Exactly. And so, of course, there's levels.
Yeah.
And that's where like the right tool for the right job. And as leaders, parents, coaches, setting the stage, setting the example of what you expect. And what does it look like? Paint the picture.
Sure.
Describe exactly what it looks like.
Defining excellence within the context of a thing. Yes.
And it's a hard thing to do. And I think also a lot of people go through life thinking like this is just common sense. These are just common sense things. Everybody knows these things.
Right.
As if everyone's lived the same life under the same conditions, raised by the same people, taught by the same people. We all know that's not true.
Sure.
And so there's bringing it back to empathy. You have to have an amount of empathy to understand that everyone has a different standard. And so if you want something, it's on you. That's the extreme ownership of Jocko Willink. If you want an outcome, it's on you. Set what excellence looks like, and then inspect to ensure that it's happening.
Sure.
It's as easy as that.
Yep.
not to oversimplify, but like I said at the beginning.
For sure. And I mean, like I'm as guilty as anybody is as far as making assumptions about what common sense should or shouldn't be.
Totally.
And that has informed my approach to problem solving these days. Like going back to the original example, if someone says something has been done, it's not a slight against them, but I am going to check.
Yeah. You brought up something. You said, I'm as guilty as anybody, right? And I think that's where the attention to detail also becomes introspective, self-reflective. Like, is the issue that person lacks common sense, like we often think? First thing to question is yourself.
Well, am I projecting a blanket common sense onto everybody else and just assuming that is the case?
Right.
That's an ego gone crazy.
Absolutely. Systematically, number 3 in the framework, humility, for that reason. But we're still all guilty of it. Even if you intentionally apply humility, we're still guilty of misattributing an intent as a problem to something.
Sure.
Right. And, I had this experience while we were away, and I was sitting through this sales discussion, right? And the salesperson they were very good. And, they were really trying to connect with me on a personal level. And as I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, I see what you're doing here. I'm like, in my brain, I'm playing chess with them. And I'm like, I don't like that. And so I'm going through this systematically. And I had attributed in these types of scenarios that the person might be like nefarious. And I was pretty confident based on everything I'm seeing that that's the case. Wrong. The person is trying to do a job.
Right.
They're trying to create an outcome. They're trying to sell me something because that's their job. And their job translates to them providing a living, a roof over their head, food for their children. That's the actual thing. Me thinking that they're acting in a nefarious way because they're being performative in their sales, they're not genuine or whatever. And maybe that's the case sometimes. But I'm sitting there and I'm applying this intent.
Yeah.
And I hadn't gone deep enough. And this is recent. And I intentionally try and apply these things. And so even when you do that, there's still layers because we can become our own worst enemy by thinking, well, I'm doing this all the time. I figured it out. I don't need to check myself.
Yeah.
And I absolutely had to. I was sitting there not only misattributing their intent, and my attention to detail missed a couple layers, but I was also sitting there, virtuous and judging them when that's completely antithetical to everything that I want to stand for within the vision I've created for myself.
Sure.
And so I say that to say, even with intention and even with working through this is why reassessment, reevaluation, this is why the framework is cyclical. So you got to keep working through it. It never ends. Yep. It's also why downstream of this, failure and forgiveness is part of that. It's because it was so obvious that I was failing at the thing that I had set out to do. My vision for myself, the person I want to be, completely falling short.
Yeah.
On multiple fronts in that case, but the attention to detail was a specific one. And so, we'll talk about more about the failure and forgiveness. But anyways, I became the obstacle.
Yeah.
Within myself. I was the problem in my analysis. And so beginning with yourself is probably the first place you have to look always.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the double-edged sword of, the human being's pattern recognition capacities, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have very good reason to feel that way about salespeople from time to time.
Sure, yeah.
I don't hate them, but I've experienced that on phone calls myself as well.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to check yourself. Be like, well, there might be something really interesting in here if I can just allow myself to stomach this phone call.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think I did a better job of that early I would get a lot of calls for like software.
Yeah.
You and I have gone through a lot of these software calls. To be honest, at the beginning, a lot of ideas I was able to come up with came from a call. Like, well, how are you guys doing things? Oh, I explained we're doing stuff like this, this, and this. And then they might say, oh, well, this is how we solve that problem.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't think about solving it that way.
Thanks for the freebie.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, I have this other tool I can use to solve in that way.
Yeah.
And then that sort of like opened a door to a new thought to think, oh, I didn't think about this, and sort of go down that rabbit hole.
Sure.
Instead of doing what I was doing in this moment, which I've done a little bit more than I'm proud of just kind of being judgmental.
Right.
In the process, instead of just being open to learning something in the experience.
Yeah.
And so, again, maybe we'll retouch on that in failure and forgiveness, but it was a really helpful observation.
Sure. But again, like I said earlier, you have attention to detail and infinite possibility, and then how much time you have as an individual.
Yeah. That's right.
Particularly for you and where you find yourself in the world.
Yeah.
I imagine it's fairly easy to feel jaded about those sales conversations when you have limited time resources.
Yes. Yeah, and so it's the way I look at it in this particular scenario is I have two choices. I don't have time and I'm not going to take it, or if I am going to take it,
send it.
Leave judgment at the door, open heart, open mind,
Sure.
for whatever I may learn, and be open to maybe they do have a genuine solution that would be beneficial.
Yeah.
Instead of the repetition of no, 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 no. To your point, the pushy side of things shows up, and that sort of makes me feel jaded. But that's just a story I've told myself about that scenario or that person or whatever the case may be. It's not true of everyone. Just because you've seen a pattern here doesn't mean it equally applies here.
Yep.
And again, I failed at that regretfully.
Way she goes. But you're thinking about it.
I am thinking about it, and that's kind of the point, I think. A lot of thinking. It sounds like a lot of work. Oh, I don't want to think that much. but it's important. It is. And it's not as hard as I think people think, because most of the time, it's just within yourself. I think what becomes hard is when you're trying to think of everything outside of you, which is the uncontrollables, the world we live in, what's happening, economically or, in other countries. That's so much information, that's so much data to try and think about, especially to apply attention to detail. When almost always the only place, and certainly the first place to start, is within yourself. Most of the details are there. You just got to ask a lot of questions.
Sure.
Peel some layers apart. I'll add one story.
Okay.
Because it was kind of in the chapter, but and I don't want to give away every story in the chapter, but in relationships, whether it's friends, spouses, relationships with your children, definitely business relationships within your team, sort of alignment, and we have a chapter on alignment, but alignment within the attention to detail is important. And this is where like some of the data analysis and collecting all the data can be really important. So I had this scenario where I had an idea of what I thought was happening, this is in business terms, but I wasn't 100% sure. And I turned out to be wrong. But what I did is I wanted to collect more data. The interesting part was it wasn't the data itself that pointed me in any direction. It was the inconsistency of the data. So I had asked a number of leaders to write down the 3 top issues that the organization faces and the 3 things that we excel at. There's no 3 issues that were the same. In fact, some that said this thing is an issue we're faced with. Another said this is something we do really well at. And so I collected the data. The data informed me, but it didn't actually in the way you would have thought. What the data told me was that we had an alignment problem.
Yeah.
None of us could agree on what the actual top 3 issues were for the organization, which meant that everyone's trying to solve what they think are the top issues. And so everyone's working on competing sort of tasks, priorities, and so forth. I think that's the sort of like second layer of the data, where it didn't say, oh, well, like 8 out of 10 people said it's this, so the probability is it's this. It said, it just showed me something under the surface that I couldn't yet see.
I think that's also a good example of what I was saying earlier, which is problem versus preference. And, you know, while I don't know the individuals who are involved, but in a business setting, there's also circumstances where people are very, not necessarily narrow-focused, but say a department. They're focused on a particular department's needs and wants and their problems. And they have a limited data set as well. So they may be looking across the fence thinking there's a problem when there's not really a problem.
Right.
There's just the idea of what a better thing would be for them.
Right. And so tying that back, that becomes, have I done my job at ensuring everyone understands what excellence looks like? What are the expectations of every outcome that we want to derive? So it's very clear that we're falling short in these particular areas, or is it left up to interpretation?
Sure.
So then the layer beneath that is it alignment or am I falling short?
Right.
And the answer is I'm probably falling short. Flowchart that right to extreme ownership, Jocko.
Right.
This is why almost everything that happens, the first place you look at is yourself, especially if you're a leader. You have a responsibility. Almost everything ties back to you. You have to figure it out, and you have to then try and rectify it.
So I guess that's a bit of an asterisk on my my comments about training.
Which,
whether or not attention to detail is tied to certain cognitive capacities or like training ability. I think regardless of someone's position on the hierarchy or like strata, whatever you want to call it, they're still going to have preference.
sure, they could have preference, but if you have everything clear and concise, I think in business anyways, you can probably remove preference. Right? It might show up, but it'd be pretty clear to kick that out. Because as long as KPIs, metrics are very clear, which I've failed at numerous times, there's too much interpretation, which is where preference continues to creep in.
Right.
To the question I asked, you could build maybe on someone's attention to detail, their ability, as long as they know the guardrails of what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah.
They could point it out. Oh, this is missing. This is broken. This doesn't work. But without those guardrails, you know, whether they can filter out their own preferences, their own sort of like stories that are informing whatever they think something should look like, that's something that we probably can't account for. And that's why your responsibility as a leader, as a coach, as a parent, is to create those guardrails.
Yeah.
This is what we need X to look like. It has to look like this. If it doesn't look like this, then we have an issue. And then, you know, then sure, there's attention to detail, and hopefully they can sort of peel apart the layers of where that's gone wrong within sort of like an operational flow or system, because they know what that looks like too.
Right.
It's been sort of mapped or drawn. But without that, a lot of assumptions and those preferences.
Yeah, it's an interesting exercise.
Yeah.
Especially hearing that one person's top problem was a celebrated success somewhere else.
Yeah, it was. I'm really glad, you know, I had that experience, because that taught me a lot about myself. And, you know, it's one thing to understand what your role is, what your job is, but you need to see where you might fall out of alignment with that. And that was a glaring observation for myself. Granted, it's hard to be perfect in all scenarios, but without accurate information, which that provided me, you don't know where you need to fix something.
Sure.
And that detail allowed me to start to apply, new solutions to a problem I didn't know existed. And then recognize that, okay, now this solution might create a new problem. It's not going to be as egregious as the one I've solved for, but now I have to sort of observe and reassess and see what new has popped up. Thank everyone that listened to this episode from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen, to go on this journey, to be patient as both James and I continue to grow and learn in the podcast space. Hopefully we're offering some value in the things that we're talking about. Hopefully we can help open your eyes. And if you have any questions for us, please comment, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on our Instagram. Let us know what we could do different, what we could do better, anything you'd like us to talk about or explore, especially relative to the topics that we're going over. And it would be a huge, huge favor and something we would really appreciate if you could hit the subscribe button. So thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you next time.